Welcome to the How Humans Work podcast. I am your host, Jeff Z, Jeffrey Salaji. So glad to have you here. Season 1 is afoot, and we are kicking it off by exploring not just human nature, but particularly the facet of fathers and fathering, the impact and the influence they have on the lives of my guests. Hold tight, stay tuned, and listen in because we are about to journey into a series of conversations. It is incredible. Let's get into it. Let's get started. Here we go. Alexie Dossa, welcome to the How Humans Work podcast. I'm really glad you joined me today.
Hey, Jeffrey, it's great to be here, and thanks so much for taking the time to talk to me.
Yeah, I mean, for the listeners, just to know, Alexie and I know each other. We met in a yoga class, and we had a fairly immediate kinship quality feeling. And as we've gotten to know each other over the past year, we not only have a lot of, philosophical and attitudinal commonalities, but I've gotten to know you. And I'm excited to have you here on this finding fathering journey I've been on. In fact, this is the 10th recording I'm doing as part of my season, which was my goal. So being with you today is exciting at that level, but also because of what I've come to know about your story.
Yeah, thank you. I think this is going to be a really fun discussion.
I hope so. I hope we have some fun.
It's really interesting how we met. The whole yoga thing was really important to me in my life, not only from the perspective of the experience of a somatic practice, but also for me, when I was raising my daughter as a single dad, it gave me this really awesome grounding kind of experience to turn to when things were just really challenging from the perspective of work and fatherhood and being away from home, living 3,000 miles away from friends and family, and so anyway, yeah, the yoga practice itself and then becoming a teacher gave me some really awesome skills to use to navigate life as a single dad.
How long ago did you find yoga, and how did that doorway open for you? And what did yoga give you in your, as you said, varied pressures?
It's such a good question since the theme is fathering, and fatherhood. My heritage is I'm half Indian. My dad was from India. My mom was from Denmark. So I think two cultures colliding here. South Asian man meets Nordic blonde-haired, blue-eyed woman. So when I grew up as a child without a father, he passed away when I was at a very young age. In fact, it's funny. Occasionally we'll pull out the actual accident report. He died in a car accident, and I'll kind of look at it from time to time because it does make me wonder what it would have been like to grow up with a father in my life, my actual father. But, when I would go back and just kind of look at family history, and that included photographs and books on the shelves, things like that. My dad was a college professor, and he had 2 PhDs, one in anthropology and one in sociology. And he was actually working on his third in economics before he passed away in this car accident. There was a picture I'll never forget. It just sticks in my mind of my dad doing a headstand. As a really young child, I asked my mom, hey, Mom, what's the story with this picture? Why is Dad upside down?
Why is Dad upside down? Totally.
Well, it's a really cool answer too. So, with his heritage being from India, yoga was part of his life too, and he had a very vigorous yoga practice. But he was doing headstands, the king of all yoga poses, because he felt like he could provide a better lecture with the oxygenation of his brain by being upside down. And so I was fascinated by that as a little kid.
He was neurohacking in the 60s or 70s or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, there's some really interesting newspaper articles about my dad as well, where he was going to teach. This is these late 60s and early 70s. So anyway, it was a long way around of answering your question. but it left a sense of longing for me because I never really had the live conversations with my dad.
Yeah.
Yet I had this rich kind of history to look at the same time, which shaped my thoughts and views about being a dad. Yeah, it was interesting.
That is really interesting. I mean, I love the arc of yoga in your fathering to find something your father used. It's really beautiful. So it's not too long or long way around at all. It's actually really, I say, like a beautiful weaving of your life, just like a little nugget of that. So you find yoga.
Yeah, well, so I find yoga as a young child, but I didn't practice. In fact, I rejected it. As a kid growing up, I didn't see it as being like this all-American thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
Here I was this product of two, immigrants who immigrated here to the United States. And, I'm trying to fit in and become an American kid with a weird name, right? By the way, my name Alexie comes from Leo Tolstoy's books. My dad read a lot of Russian literature. Apparently had some free time to do that too. And,
wow. Anthropology, sociology, economics, and Russian literature.
Yeah. So, yeah.
So how old or how young was he when he passed, and how old were you?
He was 36 years old when he passed. Car accident. He lost control of the car. He hit some gravel. And the accident was bad enough to cause enough damage to kill him. Not immediately. He didn't die immediately, but there was a process of that took place. And so that also leaves some longing for me too, because my older brother was in the car, and he doesn't talk about it so much, but I'm always trying to pry and get some thoughts and ideas about what reality was when I can't remember this. So, I was hurt in the accident. I was taken away. My father was determined on the scene that he wasn't going to live. So they took myself and a family friend who was also in the car away in the ambulance, and my dad was presumed to not make it. So they actually did take him and put him in the ambulance. He was still alive. They tried to take him to the hospital, but it didn't work out.
And you were young enough where you don't or do have memories of your father?
I have two memories.
Okay.
One memory of being in a park in Chicago where he was a college professor. We were living in Chicago, and he's pushing me in a swing and in this park. And I described this memory to my mom and everything about this park and the car we drove up in and the whole 9 yards. And so she was actually quite shocked by that. And the other memory I have is him holding me in the bathroom while he's shaving.
Yeah.
So those are the only two real faint memories.
So you were how old when he passed?
Gosh, so it was August 15th, 1971.
Okay.
I would have been about 3.5.
Okay.
So yeah, it's pretty early in life.
That's really early. So, all right. So we could go the yoga route, but I'm also just thinking, since we're right here with how was it for you, and what did you do and experience, having such a limited impression of your father, but also having, the legacy of his books and maybe the stories of your mom and maybe some stories of your older brother, and how did your father impact you beyond passing the baton of yoga?
Yeah, such a fun question to answer. So my mom, I'm the youngest of three, but my mom has always said, son, you were the one that was supposed to follow in your dad's footsteps. And I've always said, Mom, those are some awfully big footsteps to follow in when this guy, my father, had such a an education. So yeah, while I haven't pursued those types of footsteps that he left for me, it's left quite an impression on me in terms of just knowledge and education, and it's really left this legacy of exploration and really want to learn. One of the areas that you and I are, we've talked a lot about is this area of mindfulness. And, you brought up earlier that I'm in a corporate environment. So yeah, I do make a living in the corporate world, but I've always tried to bring mindfulness into this as well, just partly because of this legacy that he left me, and then also because of the value that it's provided and the skills it's been able to give me to navigate and cope challenging situations in life. So yeah, the legacy I'd say is really, really strong in this early way. I wanted to reject my heritage and be this all-American kid. And then, I would say right around my sophomore year in college, I really started to maybe have more of appreciation for this same heritage and started to dig in. That's actually when I started to consider yoga. So I, dabbled around with it. And then, I just kind of left it alone. It didn't leave enough of an impression on me, yoga nor mindfulness at that point. It wasn't until, an injury, I was, an athlete as a kid and had a car accident or two, going all the way up to the point of, right about the time I was probably maybe 30, 35 and used to run a lot. And, long story short is, physically, I just didn't feel as vigorous as I should at that age. And the one thing that actually seemed to work was yoga. And so I dug in. I practiced yoga on a regular basis and got a lot from it physically. So I didn't get the mental, spiritual side of yoga. And it wasn't really something that really gravitated to me anyway. It was the physical component. But then as I dug in and really came to appreciate yoga and then later meditation and mindfulness, I really started to try to take more and more of that in. And so it was right about, I think it was 1999 or 2000, I dove in really deep and made yoga a pillar of my life. And then later when I moved back east, I ended up going down the path of yoga teacher training just because I wanted to dig in deeper from my own personal sense and practice. And all of this, I credit to my father, because I never would have gone down this path, or I don't think I would have gone down this path had I not had that influence that he left for me.
Yeah, no, I feel that, and I get that, and I guess I'm kind of I'm stunned in a way of, the signature of a life can be as influential as the life itself. Like how profound that is. Obviously there's the genetic legacy, all the deep imprinting that happened in your toddlerhood and babyhood, and those things that get transmitted into the body. But even still, I like how you milked that, in a sense, like found milk from things to nourish the father longing, the understanding of, who my father was, what he means to me, and what I can learn from him. And even in those gaps, you found a way.
Yeah. I don't know how to explain this, but I just feel like I anchored to it, so while I didn't grow up with a father, I anchored to who he was and what he left for me, even though he wasn't there physically. And a huge part of that anchoring was this, this heritage, which then became more of a fascination also about just India itself.
And what about like his parents and more family members from that lineage or that side of your lineage?
Such a good question too. I love this question. So, two cultures collide, with my mom and my dad coming together. Well, two cultures also collide when the father passes, and, culturally the children are supposed to be raised alongside or with the father's parents. And my mom wasn't going to move to India. So we were actually supposed to go to India when he was alive. He was going to write his third doctoral thesis around the urbanization of Indian cities based on Western economics.
The foresight in that particular thesis is incredible. I mean, this is 1971. He's thinking this.
Well, this is actually earlier than that. This is more like 1969, maybe.
I mean, I guess if you're smart, you just see these things coming, but it seems so prescient right now.
Yeah, it's so funny. So Jeff, one of these legacies that he left me was think of this old school, 1950s style suitcase, black, and it's got like this tattered leather and it's kind of square looking. As a child, I found this suitcase and my mom had placed a lot of documents in there. And some of those documents included, imagine, if you will, like a legal yellow kind of pad. And it was his handwriting, like handwritten outline of this thesis. So the only reason why I really knew what he was writing about is as this kid flipping through these notes and like reading through and what he, framed up in terms of what he wanted to write about and what he was going to research and what he was going to do. And that was really fascinating to me. Even at a really young age, I was trying to understand some of the stuff, but it just left this impression on me. Yeah, so to tie it back to where I was going, we were supposed to move to India for 2 years. That's when he was going to, immerse us in his culture and his family, and he was going to do this work, and we were going to be there for a few years and then come back. Well, this crazy incident in life where this car accident takes place and all of that kind of was pushed aside and obviously didn't take place. But then our family, my dad's side of the family, wanted us to come to India, and that's where things were going to take place from there. Like dad's parents were going to take care of us, and my mom was not going to have any part of that. She didn't want to move to India, and so there was a falling out between the different sides of the family. Falling out is maybe too strong of a word, just disagreement, and so we lost some of the connectivity to my father's side of the family, not completely, but it just wasn't the same.
I think there's a third collision of cultures here, and that is America.
Yes.
Right. So you have two immigrant parents, and you're kind of like, I'm kind of somewhat not into my heritage. I'm not that interested. I'm going to be this American boy, kid, and yet it comes back and back again. And so I'm also just appreciating that 3 or 4 of the interviews I've had have actually been immigrant stories, the children of immigrants, and the way immigration happens in America, and the impact on the kids and the situations. So it's interesting that you have that as well. I guess my what I'm becoming curious about is what am I becoming curious about? I want to actually go back to the moment, actually, if I was really honest, where I lost the train of thought. I lost my train of thought when you were the kid looking at the yellow pad with a thesis on it. And I'm sitting there trying to appreciate that moment in your life when you're what age and you're trying to conceive of your dad's advanced intellectual capacity and how that experience was for you.
Well, I'll tell you, Jeff, this is, you're a good interviewer, because this is another good question. This magic suitcase, because that's kind of what it was for me, is I would open this thing up and I would flip through these papers. Not only were there like these handwriting areas of this thesis that he was writing about, but there was also all these documents from various universities that wanted him to come teach, or where he had been a guest lecturer, or he was looking at in terms of, where we might settle so he could do what he wanted to do, which was form the College of Anthropology and the College of Sociology, and start that at a small college that didn't have that today. And so that's ultimately what he did. We moved to Oregon, and there's a college, small college there called Oregon College of Education. It's now Western Oregon College, and he founded those two schools, this School of Anthropology and School of and Sociology. Actually, one of the memories I've already shared with you were all these books, right? These books.
Yes.
When I say books, it's like an entire library. There are thousands of books, and so I just have these really, really clear and distinct memories of the books, the suitcase, pictures, and then how you'll see in some shops where you'll see like the brass figurines and things like that you would see from India, the goddess Devi or something like that. So these were all these anchor points that I had that had like captivated my attention and my thinking at times. And so when I would go downstairs and I would look at this suitcase, I would flip through all these documents. I would see things in there, like my dad came over and spent time at the Institute of World Affairs in Canaan, Connecticut. And I'm thinking as a young kid, what is this? What does this mean? What does the University of South Carolina mean? What does the University of Wisconsin mean? What does the University of Chicago mean? And Elmhurst? There's all these different interesting, areas that I could dig into from within the suitcase. And these were all like moments of time in my dad's life. So the yellow, legal pad paper was just one collection of papers of many within the magic suitcase.
It's just great. It's like a dream. It's like a symbol from a dream. That's like, there's just so much energy, even though his physical presence wasn't there, there's so much energy and accomplishment. I mean, 36 and to have done so much and so much energy, and that there was a way for you to access it. I love that.
Yeah. I was going to say one more thing that's, he emigrated from India. He went to St. Xavier's University, which is this really, really old, very prestigious university, liberal arts university in Mumbai, which at the time was Bombay. And he graduated first in his class. And I remember, once again, in the suitcase, I'm finding these things and I'm just fascinated by this stuff. And I see him wearing a cricket uniform, and he's a cricket player. He's on the cricket team. There's all this stuff that's also associated with theology and religion. Mm-hmm. So a very, very distinct memory I have is, as part of my dad's studies in both sociology and anthropologies, he explored religion. Mm-hmm. And if you recall, the Hare Krishna movement here in the U.S., we had these orange robes. That was in a closet. But here we went to this Catholic university in India, and a Catholic high school, St. Mary's High School in India. And then there's this aspect of being raised for a while as Presbyterian. I mean, I'm painting this picture because I was confused. I was thoroughly confused.
I want to know about the robes. Was he like a closet bhakti? Did he have this Krishna devotee part of him?
So what he did was he immersed himself and the family in these traditions. And so as a child, this is another legacy my father left for me, I was confused about religion and spirituality in general. And, I don't remember all of, the experiences in that respect, but I remember seeing the information that came from that, the robes, the pictures of, like an article of him being published in India, doing some Catholic relief effort. And, so there was just this really kind of strange amalgamation of influence from a theological perspective. And a lot of which I've researched on my own, later in life, trying to figure out why was he doing this, and what led him down this path. And then now, how is that impacting me? To kind of take this back to the whole yoga and mindfulness thing is, the one place where I found the most respite is yoga. I mean, I got into yoga because of what it gave me from my experience, from not only a physical level, but a spiritual level as well. And then took that and explored it deeper into understanding some of the neuroscience of mindfulness. And that's kind of actually when you and I met, was doing this exploration into the neuroscience of mindfulness, which for me was an offshoot of yoga. So anyway, all this kind of is these inputs from my father.
Yes.
I had to glean legacy.
Yeah. You had to do a little extra work, and there was no one there to resist in a way too, or fight with, which is different. I know when my dad passed, it's like, okay, any fight I had with him was done. It was a weird change because it's like, who are you going to struggle with now if I'm going to have a struggle? But I want to look at just father figures. And I guess I'll lead with the question of, even though your father was there and there was this magic suitcase, was there also a hole?
Yeah,
and what did you do with that? And where did other men come in your life to help you with that?
Yeah, there's definitely still a hole. I often, I've even been asked this question. I've even thought of it quite frequently as a kid, and even in adulthood, is that if I could have a conversation with one person, and it's anybody, it's obvious, it's my dad. I'd love to have this conversation that I was never able to have. So
what would you ask him? Do you know? Have you thought that far?
Well, first of all, I want to see if you had like this English Oxford accent.
So there's no like recordings of his lectures, anything you've come across?
Yeah, so there's one recording, and I haven't listened to it yet. So it's also part of the magic of yet to come. So
okay,
there's my mom gave me a reel to reel. It's a recording. It's a video of my father, and this is kind of crazy, but I'm afraid to take it to get it digitized because I'm afraid they're going to destroy it. And at the same time, I need to get it digitized so I can watch it. And I don't even know if it includes sound, frankly. But
go.
I do have this hole, but I don't feel it, the pain from that hole. It's an unknown, right? There's not a lot of pain that's associated with that. I'd say my older brother has a little bit of pain from it because he actually experientially has things to remember, where I don't. You know, I have my imagination. He has his experiences.
Yeah.
And so there's it's kind of an interesting dichotomy there. Ask me the question again. I mean,
so you know, you said there's a hole. It doesn't cause pain. I mean, just to I mean, some of my wisdom in learning life, and I was talking about this in another conversation the other day, which is that, you know, one thing that I realized is where my wound with my father is where he is in me. You know, that the actual place that I felt hurt by him is also the place where he penetrated into my soul, as it were. It's a point of communication. It's actually an access point to the relationship. So the wound or the hole or the loss is, and the hurts are points of actually connection.
Yeah.
So I was just saying, well, what did you do with that part? Who came in and buffered that or brought love to that or filled out that sense that he wasn't able to because of that tragedy?
Yeah, you know, that's a good question. So I had two men in my life that became father figures. So my best friend, Chris, growing up, I met him in the second grade, and he and I became really good close friends all through high school. And his father was, and his mom too, but his parents really kind of took me in. We had the kind of relationship where every weekend there was a sleepover. I was either at his house or he was at mine, and most of the time it was over.
This is your fishing buddy, Chris, right?
Yeah, one of my fishing buddies.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Yeah, one of the guys I would do these backpacking trips into Alpine Lakes and
nice
fun. But yeah, so his dad played that role for me, and then.
Was he conscious with that? Like, what's your memory of him in terms of, was it just like an unspoken thing, or did he overtly embrace you, kind of knowing that you needed that? Like, how did he deal with that?
You know, it was never spoken, but I would say it's the latter. It was more overtly, like he knew, right? You know, here's this woman, Ingrid Dossa, my mom, raising these three boys, and I'm his son's best friend, and it's kind of hard to not see the dynamic of a lot of wild and craziness of three boys. So I think he and he was a wonderful guy. I really love him to this day. But it was just something I think that just was natural and kind of innate to kind of take place.
And so did he impact you in terms of like influencing you in some way similar that your dad did? Or was it just that you had someone there to kind of do the things with? Like, did you take from him attitudes towards life and how it's unfolded? Or was it just enjoying the participation and loving the relationship?
I think, it's the latter. But what you described, in your question, I actually got from a second father figure. It was adolescence, and I was growing up, and there are needs that you have at that age, and then learnings that you get, and then when you grow up and as you're more, developed, mentally, you start to have different needs. And
I know the story. I think I know the story you're going to, because I think we've talked about it. But before we go there, I would love for you to name your father, Chris's father, and then so I get the name. I think it's just important to say names. Yeah. Yeah.
So my father's name is Ramzan Dossa, and
I don't even know if I actually heard it clearly because I don't have the perceptions of that particular vocabulary or letter combination. So say his name one more time.
Sure. So it was Ramzan
Ramzan.
Shabanali.
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 Shabanali. Okay, there we go.
Dossa.
Dossa. Great.
Yeah.
Ramzan.
And then otherwise known as Ram.
Ram. Easy.
Yeah.
And Chris's father?
Yeah, Chris's father. He went by Ralph, but Ralph was actually to Rolf. And he was Finnish. He was first generation here in the U.S. His mom and dad were from Finland, and they had immigrated here.
And then your other father figure that I think is where you're going to, yeah.
Yeah. So, I put myself through college attending bar, and this is during the crazy days of grunge in Seattle, and so many stories I could tell you about that with all the bands that came to the bar. And
were you rolling long hair those days?
No, but I was definitely wearing flannel shirts.
Okay.
But yeah, so Angelo comes in that Angelo owned an Italian restaurant down the street on University Avenue, and so his name is Angelo Lupianez. I have all these figures in my life that were also either immigrants or children of immigrants, first generation. And Angelo was half Italian and half Spanish. He was this one of my best friends in life. Actually went to work for him as a chef, but we used to call him the swarthy little man. He was just this really just rough and tumble kind of guy, but at the same time, the juxtaposition of who this guy was and what he represented was so profound. He left home when he was 8 years old, and he had a large family.
Do you know why? Do you know why a kid would leave at 8?
Yeah. His parents both died, and the children were left. He was the youngest of 5. And he just had this spirit in him that he just, needed to just wander. And long story short about Angelo is he left home, put himself to work in restaurants, and traveled around Europe. And, he didn't leave at 8, but he would leave and come back. And then by the time he was 14, he decided he was going to set off on his own and literally left. It's crazy, but Jeff, this story is pretty awesome because he left such an influence in my life. He travels throughout Europe and decides he wants to see the rest of the world. And he's in Norway and basically cons his way onto a merchant marine vessel, lies about his age and says he's 18 and he's not, and travels the world as a merchant marine for 3 years. And then eventually, it's a classic story. It's almost too goofy, but it's true. They pull into New York and he sees the Statue of Liberty. Decides he's just not getting back on the boat and lands in New York and again finds restaurant jobs and then found his way to getting his high school equivalency. He got his GED, and then from there showed enough aptitude. He got accepted to go to NYU and gets his undergrad and then his master's in psychology.
Okay.
So extremely well-read man. Like my father, Angelo was this guy in his restaurant, had piles of books everywhere. Mm-hmm. And, he was such a well-read man. And yet at the same time, he's kind of this crass individual. If you can imagine growing up without learning your manners, that's basically him. So he used to come down to the bar where I work. And right as I'm about to close, he would roll in, take up a seat at the bar, and basically, is it okay to swear?
Absolutely.
Shit fuck guy, get me my fucking coffee, dude. And then what is his
shit fuck guy, give me my coffee, dude.
Yeah, he would show up and ask for his coffee and then also his snifter of cognac and want to sit and talk. Here he's winding down from running his restaurant and he's wanting to just slowly wind down and chit chat with me and have his drink and his coffee. And, So your first impression, of course, we felt more offended and like irritated by him. Is that what you're saying? Yeah. But at the same time, you talk about authenticity. This guy was about, when you think of the word authenticity, this guy exudes authenticity. He doesn't care what he looks like. His hair's disheveled, his clothing's disheveled. He's got a cigarette hanging out of the side of his mouth with rolls in the ash. the ash breaks off of his cigarette and drops onto the bar, and he doesn't care. It's just, he's just a very sweet little man. But at the same time, intelligence that he exuded was it was extraordinary.
Yeah.
And so I was fascinated by him because we'd have these really amazing conversations. And eventually I found my way down to his restaurant. I was like, I got to find out who this guy really is and see what his restaurant's really like. And it was only like four or five blocks from where the bar was where I was working. And I started to go in and just hang out with him and learn from him. He had so much information and so much knowledge to share. I was fascinated by it, and he became a father figure to me.
Did he have his own sons or children?
He had his own. He had two daughters, and then after I knew him, he remarried and had a son. So, but that was really strange too, because he wasn't the best father. I think it had a lot to do with his own life. Growing up without parents at such an early age, much like myself, and then having this really just quite extraordinary life at such a young age of traveling the world, and then having to fend for himself, and all these things that are kind of primal and then exploratory at the same time were kind of manifesting in him. And then the other thing that is so present, or was so present with him, was his level of knowledge. Every time I walked into his restaurant, he was there. The cigarette was sticking out of his mouth. Yeah. There was a cup of coffee and a pile of books, and his nose was planted in a book. He read, all the time. It was what he did. And then when he couldn't read, it was because he had to work, and it was because he had to serve his customers. So, he's kind of an odd father figure in some respects.
Do you think you were a son figure for him, as it were?
Absolutely.
And how did he find you? Like, okay, so he has all this knowledge, he has this character to him and these stories to tell. And obviously he shared them because you know him, but how did he find you? Like, what did he bless you with? And if it was particular to you, or was he just telling the stories and he was there to just share and give?
He was so astute when it came to reading people. And he was so sharp with his tongue. Even though he's speaking English in his second language, he spoke Italian, Spanish, and English, and I think he spoke some French too, if I remember correctly. He wanted to pass on his knowledge, and he saw me as somebody who took interest in his experience and also what he had to share. There are, 1,000 or more nights where I went down to his restaurant and would stay and play chess with him and drink red wine. And
could you beat him in chess?
Yeah, he kicked my ass.
I felt that was coming. I kind of was guessing that. Yeah.
I beat him twice, and I'm almost certain he let me win those two times.
So literally 1,000 nights,
if not more.
That's amazing.
There was a period of my life where there was probably, I would say, a solid 3 or 4 years. I was working 5, 6, sometimes 7 days a week, and I would close down the bar and then go down to his restaurant, or he would close down his restaurant and come up to the bar. I really took interest in, just hanging out with him because it was free food too, right here. He's got the restaurant, free food.
You're in college, perfect.
But at the same time, I had this kind of interest in learning how to cook. And this is a guy who is, for the most part, most nights of the week was a one-man show. People would come to the door, he would greet them, he would seat them, and then he would go back and he would start doing his cooking. Some nights I'd be down there hanging out and, just eating bread and dipping it in olive oil and drinking red wine or having a cup of coffee or an espresso. And he would go, "Shit, fuck Alex, come back here. I need your help." So, I would go back there and I'm in his kitchen. And I'm like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. And so he slowly taught me how to help him out. And a lot of that was just learning.
Kitchen work. That's great. So did he take an interest in what you were going through? Did he you talk about your relationships or your schooling, or was he more just delivering his knowledge to you?
No, all the above.
Good.
He took a tremendous interest in women I was dating and advice from a fatherly perspective.
Beautiful. Sometimes people just want to have their stories heard.
No, in fact, it was the opposite. I would want to have him tell me stories and he wouldn't necessarily just volunteer them. We would just get into a conversation and I would pull it out of him. He was more interested in me and what I was doing in my life. He didn't want me to be a fuck up.
Was that a possibility for you at that point?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. So, when you're working in a bar during the heyday of the grunge music, and the Seattle Supersonics were doing well. I mean, it was an epic time to be in Seattle, and I made a lot of money behind the bar. And the life of a bartender, bar manager is a short one. If you're partaking, and he saw that I had a lot of potential. He never once said it, but I could tell he was worried that I was going to just throw away my education, the reason why I was there, and throw it away for a job in a bar.
He was good to you, man. He was really good to you.
Yeah, and he was. There's the good and the bad side of Angelo. There's no.
So the bad. I'm kind of curious about a little bit about the shadow, if you want to share anything about that. But I'm also curious, like, how did that run you had with Angelo come to an end?
Well, the run came to an end because he passed away. So that was ultimately how it came to an end. But the premature end to it was I finally meet my wife after, and now my ex-wife. But so I left Seattle because I get a job opportunity, and the job opportunity takes me to San Francisco. And while I was in San Francisco, met a woman. We moved back to the Northwest. Had a stop in Portland, and made our way back to Seattle. And then so Angelo enters the scene again on a regular basis because I'm going back down there and seeing Angelo every now and again, where all of my friends, my extended network of friends through me, all started to go down to Angelo. So it was a very social, he was core to my social life too at that point.
Wow.
There's a shadow side of Angelo too. I mean, Angelo he had his own demons, and I think a lot of those demons came from, again, this childhood that he had, and then this life of living like a feral life for a while, frankly. And, and that leaves an imprint in you and how you socialize and how you conduct yourself in life. And, it was just a really interesting experience in knowing Angelo, and my friends knowing him too.
Yeah. So were you in town when he passed away?
He always used to say when it was time for him to go, that he was going to go his own way. He would occasionally talk about, I'd sell the restaurant, and I would buy a boat, and I would take the boat, and I would just, sail around until I don't want to sail anymore, and then just end it. That he literally would talk in terms like that. It was a kind of a strange conversation to have, not being, really in tune with how desperate that sounds and how dark that sounds. But he didn't look at it in a dark way because, to tie it all together, he was extremely spiritual in some respects as well. And he believed in many lives. He believed in past lives. He believed in future lives. And he did a long stint in Scientology. So there's all these just weird dynamics that kind of come together with Angelo that make him who he is. For me, I would always have like a wall that I would put up and say, I'm not going to cross that. That's that line or that wall with Angelo. It needs to be there to keep things healthy. But all that said, he was an extremely powerful influence in my life.
Yeah.
I recognized the darkness, and I recognized the extreme light that he brought too. Hey, one thing I want to, this is about fatherhood and fathering, and that, with my daughter, Sydney, all of these people have had an influence on me in terms of how I am as a father, starting obviously with my own. I had this deep rooted feeling that because I grew up without a father, there's no way in hell that I could possibly ever be a father. So I carried that thought with me for a long time, well into my 30s. I mean, I was probably about 30, maybe 32 years old when, I was still resisting, at this point in time, I'm married, and my ex wanted to have children, and I was against having children. I was just in fear of being a father, and just that fear of that. Turns out I'm going to brag a little bit. I think I'm a pretty fucking good dad. But
nice. So how did you get from fear of father to being a pretty fucking good dad?
Trial by fire, first of all. So my ex and I, we're married. We have Sydney. And then we left Portland for Westchester, Pennsylvania. I took a job back there. I'm a young father. The marriage started to dissolve. And so we ended up getting divorced. To kind of compress the story a little bit, I ended up fighting pretty hard in court and winning custody or primary custody of Sydney. And then, all of a sudden, responsible for this beautiful, just amazing human being named Alexie Dossa. And at the same time, it was really scary because I had no family, no close relatives within 3,000 miles. So anyway, I was thrust into this situation where I was already, a new father, not necessarily, prior to that feeling confident about being a father, and then thrust into raising her by myself. And so I raised Sydney by myself from the time she was basically 5, 4.5, 5, until she was 11. It was an amazing experience. It's again, there's a darkness to it and there's a lightness to it. The lightness outweighs the darkness, tenfold. Just a beautiful, beautiful father-daughter experience. I love her more than you can put into words.
Is that the time you found your confidence, when you just had to fly solo?
Yeah, it was. The confidence came from a number of different places, right? So I had these 3 previous father figures who ultimately helped me to have a sense of confidence anyway. Mm-hmm. And then I became a fairly social guy over time, and was able to build a decent network of friends. And the caring of nurturing of people is really beautiful. In Westchester, Pennsylvania, there are a lot of folks I could say so many good things about, because they saw me here thrust into the situation of being a single father. Mm-hmm. and needing help. So
it's so amazing community, and that I mean, just like how community can and often does fill in those gaps, especially around family systems. It's really beautiful.
Definitely. The comment made about family systems absolutely applies here.
So you find your confidence, you have this community, you have these 3 lineages that help you, and yet you still have a lot in front of you. You said at times it's heavy, it's a lot of work, it's, you're on your own with it.
Well, it became less heavy because I had this realization. And the realization come back full circle to the heritage that my dad left me, is I became extremely interested in how to just let go and just accept.
Can we talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I would love to, because this is actually something I like to teach myself now. And I teach these 2-day workshops on the neuroscience of mindfulness and qualities of emotional intelligence. And I'll admit, I didn't have the most emotional intelligence leading up until this point in time. And I had to really learn.
Totally. I mean, really, there's some people who are gifted, but I think if I was honest, first of all, I think emotional intelligence is a fluid thing based on our conditions. Maturity is part of that condition and development. And I still feel like I am learning to be more emotionally intelligent, or what I like to say also stress intelligence, because I think they're deeply wed. But so you're not that emotionally intelligent at that point, and you're learning this thing, which I think you said is letting go. Yeah. Did you say letting go?
Yeah. And so, like people that are thrust into the situation I am, if they're smart, they actually, they get help. And, so I went and found a really good therapist. Mm-hmm. To really kind of talk through and digest a lot of what was going on. And a lot of it was early on, it was for survival. Once I got past the survival phase, it was about how do I become the best human being and the best father that I can. This amazing therapist, Dominic Carduccio, back in Westchester, Pennsylvania, I spent a lot of time with him. That, along with the mindfulness, along with my own absolute interest in learning, took me to this place of developing a lot more emotional intelligence. And so, I really kind of immersed myself for a long time, years, just independently trying to understand what is it? What is it like to actually just accept and let everything else fall away and not worry about the things you can't control anymore, and really just focus in on those things that truly deserve your energy and your time and your attention. And so I really took that to heart, and I tried to, do what I call getting light. And what getting light means is lightening the load, getting rid of the stuff, the rocks and the boulders, if you will, that you're carrying around because you feel like you need to, but that create a sense of freedom when you let them go. And so for me, the things that I needed to carry, I was so dedicated to my own personal health, both mental, physical, spiritual. Those three, the combination of those three, I was intent on, if I can become more healthy, greater well-being, then I'm going to be the best father I could possibly be to this daughter. And so I became extremely driven by understanding a lot of different things, starting with the human brain and psychology. And I believe it's made me who I am in a number of ways. Not only my father in terms of the legacy he left me, but the imprint and impression that Ralph left on me as a younger adolescent, and then Angelo, college, post college, and then now all of a sudden, hey, you know what? The rite of passage to being a father and true manhood, and that experience that I had to live and still live to this day, and I still live with a tremendous sense of gratitude. Practices. Yeah. I had all the reasons in the world to hate what was going on, and all these things were done to me, versus, hey, you know what? This is a tremendous education I'm getting at the same time. And I've learned to really rely on gratitude. Like, look at those things in my life that I was extremely grateful for: my health, my daughter and her health, and these opportunities to learn. And so, from a fathering perspective, while I'm not like some wise old sage, I do feel like my life experience has given me the ability now to father, if you will, or provide, mentoring or just influence on other human beings, given what I've gone through. And so for me, my way of giving back in life is actually to try to take some of this informal education and then my formal education and actually try to enable people to develop some of these skills to navigate life more skillfully. I don't really want people to have to go through some of these crazy events that I've gone through, and there are more that I haven't shared. But I do feel like that I'm kind of in this position now where I need to be able to share this back in a kind of a father-like role and in a father-like way.
Beautiful. And you said something before I asked you to drop into, and I really liked the way you not only talked about the context of letting go, but you talked about your core practice of acceptance and getting lighter. But you also said something to come full circle with your father. And I'm not sure if you got to that point. Did you articulate that? What was the full circle?
The full circle with my father was, when I'm going through this crazy experience of having a marriage dissolve and, crazy financial situation, with the economy and a house that needs payment and all these extraneous factors, I took this time during that period of time to really dive in at this point and try to get to know who my dad was even more. Because I felt like it was a pillar of strength or an anchor that I could latch onto during a tremendously challenging time where I didn't really feel like I had a whole lot of solid footing. And that solid footing came from thinking about this heritage that my dad left me and these practices that my dad left me through his influence and who he was.
I'm grateful. I'm always grateful, but I'm grateful for you today to share your amazing stories. You're a great storyteller, and you have some stories. And but the coherence of your stories, the weave between your father and your heritage and your work life. I mean, you have a very coherent narrative that you're living?
I never really thought of it that way.
I mean, you do. It's like you're not fragmented. I mean, maybe we're all a little fragmented, but in this particular part, in terms of your journey around your father, there's a very coherency in your understanding of who he is and how you've worked with him and the other men that have come in your life and what they've given you and the limitations and your own journey and how those things have converged. And it's not the first time I've been in a one of these conversations in this series and seen almost like an organic impulse towards healing.
Oh gosh, yeah.
You know what I mean? And not only that, the way life conspires to support those impulses towards healing and the way pain and struggle alert someone to the need for that healing. And that's my deepest impression, in addition to my gratitude for you.
Well, one last comment on that. You know, it's mindfulness for me, and I believe others too, that allows for this sense of openness and curiosity in the present moment. And if we live our lives that way, then it completely changes our mindset. Mm-hmm. And when our mindset's changed, and we remove the filters that would normally be there because we truly are present, I think it changes the course of life. I know for certain that it's changed the course of my life.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Please follow us on your favorite streaming platform and share our podcast with your community and friends. All music is composed by the incredible Chase Jackson at chasejacksonmusic.com. To learn more about this show, our guest, as well as Jeffrey and his work helping people find peace with their human nature, go to howhumanswork.us.